Leadership is a very bad place to work out your need for attention and love because it never comes. You may think it does, but it never really comes. So you really have to understand, the reason I lead or the way I lead is I do the right thing for these people, whether they like it or not, whether they appreciate it or not. And I will do the right thing for them, even if they, at the end of the thing, reject me and kick me out. I'll still do the right thing as best I see it for them because that's what leaders do.
Welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hello and welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. My name is Tim Rush, and I am here today talking with Judson Poling about leadership. Judson is one of our weekend leaders in the Crucible Project, going back to the very beginnings of TCP. So Judson, what else do the people listening today need to know about you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. Yes, I do go back almost to the beginning. So I heard about the Crucible Project weekends after Greg had done his first one. So he had done the prototype, then he did the first, where they invited people to come. And then I heard about it there. And then I sent a spy to the second one and heard good things. And so ended up on the third one. But yeah, I go back almost to the beginning. My background, I worked in a church for 29 years. I was on staff of a church. I'm seminary trained. And since I left the church work, I haven't left ministry. 2009, I started out on my own, and I actually do a lot of the things now that I used to do in church work, but I do them for anybody that wants to employ me. So I'm a freelance writer. I do coaching, which I did a lot in the church. And then as much time as I possibly can, I work with Crucible. I probably do 10 to 12 Crucible events a year. And again, none of us who do this can make a full-time living at it. We get a stipend, but I just do as much as I possibly can and still stay afloat.
So I want to talk about your leadership journey. I have some questions for you, but I'm super curious. When you say you heard about this weekend and you sent a spy, what was it about the weekend that made you say, I want to attend, I want to know more about this?
Well, the idea of, quote unquote men's work had been on my radar for a while. You may recall back in the 90s, there was a lot of interest in helping men deepen their faith. And many people have heard of the Promise Keepers. And those were large gatherings, but they were helping men get together and feel like they were making connections with each other. And I was actually talking recently with one of the guys that was part of that leadership core. And he said, we would pick songs that would have the range that men can sing. And so the thoughtfulness that went into the speakers and the way that they did the program to target men really resonated well. Now, of course, they're big events, so the small group side of things or the development side in smaller circles, they tried to do things, but that never really became as much of a powerhouse as the event was. And I saw that and I thought that was a good thing, but I had been pondering really since the birth of my son, how to be a dad. And really, as I looked at my son, this was literally hours after he was born, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to help him become a man. I know the way to be an adult. I'm not sure I know the way to be a man. How am I going to do this? Nobody showed me the way. How do I show him? And so, again, that just came out of nowhere. But as I thought about my own journey and thought about what I want to do for my son and what I want to do for other men in my life, I realized that we had to do more than what was happening in local church work. And we were doing a lot of good things, men's ministries and men's breakfasts and Bible studies and stuff. But it got on my radar that there needed to be more. And so by the time 2002 came around, when Greg did the first weekend, it was already on my radar that if somebody's doing something for men, I'm curious what that might be.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I had a similar introduction, or I was led into it from the question of what to do for men. My context was living in Mexico at the time, and other missionaries saying, hey, how can we get men involved? And what's fascinating about this is, for our listener out there, Judson and I were just talking about, before we hit record, about how we've seen this work and the fruit of this in the lives of men in Australia and Kenya. So there's something to this that's universal, it's fun. It's fun to get to be a part of that. So let's take a few steps back. In your own personal leadership journey, when did you turn around and notice people are following me?
Well, first, let me lay some groundwork here. I'm a reluctant leader. I'm not a leader because I have always aspired to be a leader. In some ways, I feel like I got tricked into it. So when I think back to some early leadership experiences, I actually go back to grade school. This is probably second or third grade, and it was winter, and we got in a snowball fight. So half the class was on one side and half the class was the other. It was sort of random how everybody got into these two teams throwing snowballs at each other. And we decided the other team started building like a fort, like a wall to protect themselves and get behind. I thought, let's do the same here on this side. So I just kind of rallied everybody together, like, let's make this wall. And I remember I said, grab some snowballs and put them in there. And this one little girl came up to me. She goes, is this one big enough? And I remember thinking, am I deciding this? I guess I'm deciding. So I said, yes, anything you bring. And I had this idea that, we should include everybody. Even the small snowball people should be able to put their snowballs in there. Because the other guys, all they were doing was making these huge monster rock, big snowball things. So yeah, I guess that was one of the first times I thought, first of all, I took the initiative to do this. Second of all, people seemed to be asking me what they should do. And I felt like I had some good ideas of what they should do.
That is a great story in the simplicity of it. And so my follow-up is, from the beginning, what do you have confidence that you were doing well? And I feel like you gave us a window into that.
Yeah, well, so the other thing that happened was I was raised in a church environment, and I remember thinking of Jesus's story about building a house on the rock. Now, talk about a lack of appropriate application. I said, okay, guys, let's dig down first before we build our wall. I was thinking of Jesus's words. You're supposed to go down to the rock. Again, that's a misapplication of that verse, but there was just something about I saw in my brain that I thought Jesus might have something wise to say about this. And that even at that age, I don't believe I was a believer at that time. I was certainly, being Christianized, but I hadn't made my own decision yet. But I think as a leader, that is true to this very day, that I do want to understand what God would say leaders should and shouldn't do, or how they should lead, or what they should do. So I'm glad I had that. I'm glad I had that wiring. And then when I did become a Christian in my teens, it kicked in full, in a huge way. So there's this idea that I need help. I need, even God's help. The other thing I really was happy is, as I looked at my team, they weren't all winners. The other team had all the kind of the big guys, the jock guys. My team was just kind of everybody else. And I had this idea, everybody should have a place here. Everybody should be included. And, the girl with the small snowball, she has her contribution to make. So that's also something I've believed as a leader, is that I want to find out what people can bring. I don't expect them to bring what they cannot bring. And I believe there's a place for them. And I think good leaders do that. I don't know that I consciously thought I need to be a good leader to do that, or I need to do that to be a good leader, but it just made sense to me that, leaders include as best they can everybody with what they can bring. So those are two things that come to mind. The other thing, frankly, is that I didn't need to be the leader. And that's why I say I'm a reluctant leader. They just started doing stuff that it seemed to make sense and people follow. So I don't need to be up front. I don't need to have people see me as a leader. But if I see something that needs to get done, I want to do it. And then I realize, well, I can't do it alone. So we got to get some other people here. And that's been in the background of my leadership.
So tell us about what that looks like today, like those simple concepts. That was a beautiful illustration of making the best choice you can, like building the wall with a great foundation, doing the best you can with what you know at the time. And then when you find something new, making a new choice. So what does that look like today in your leadership?
So let me give a little bit of the arc that happened in between the snow fort and today. I worked in a large megachurch. And when I started with the church back in 1980, it was not the mega church that it became, but there were some really extraordinary leaders there. I realized pretty quickly within the first few years I was there is that my leadership would be different than a lot of the other people that were there. And at first that made me insecure. I thought, what's wrong with me that I'm not as good as they are? But I became an observer of leadership. And fortunately, because of the church I was involved in, we had a lot of leadership leaders and teaching, and literally world-class leaders were invited in to come. So I feel like I got this wonderful learning experience, at least from people who were world-class leaders, but I saw that I wasn't one of them. And so if I overreacted a bit, I think there was a sense in which I think I got smaller than I needed to get. But it did help me to let go of any kind of a leadership idolization. The other thing, frankly, I saw was leaders take hits. Oh my gosh. I think I had idealized leadership. And then when I realized, no, you set yourself up to have everybody and their complaints come right at you. And they don't usually thank you very effusively, but boy, will they tell you if you did it wrong. And I saw that. I saw that in spades. I mean, to the point of, people will give you death threats, even in the church, if they don't think you did a good job. I mean, it's just crazy to think what leaders have to put up with. So again, I didn't inspire to that, but I saw that leadership is ultimately servanthood. It's giving, which is exactly what Jesus said. The greatest among you will be the servant. So I really saw that, and I was willing to lead in the spheres that I was allowed to lead. So when I started to get involved with Crucible, I had no aspiration to be a weekend leader. At that time, Greg was the only weekend leader. He led them all. And I got involved in a small group with him, as well as being on weekends as a staff member. And he, after, it was 5 years, I think, of being co-leading groups with him and being on weekends with him, that he finally said, Judson, I would like you to lead a weekend. And my first reaction was no, I'm not, I don't want to do that. I like serving on the weekends, but I don't need, nor do I even really want to be the leader there. And Greg was very encouraging. And he said, look, I will be there to support you. I think you've got gifts that will work in this setting. I want to help you get there. And so again, in a reluctant way, I thought, okay, well, if Greg's there to help me and I have that support, and I realize I'm familiar with the weekends. I know what goes on in them. I think I could do this. And we do, if we're going to grow, it has to go beyond just Greg. So this would have been November of 2008. I was the first one to lead a weekend other than the founder, Greg. And it went well. And I was really proud of a lot of the things I saw that I did, decisions I made. I didn't freak out. I mean, I'm kind of ADD, so there's stuff always gets my attention and sometimes distracts me. But yeah, I saw that, given the support I'm getting, I can do this. And that's key. Given the support I'm getting, I can do this. I'm not leading alone. There's people here to support me. And we in leadership in Crucible, this is one of our values, is we never do lead alone. We lead with a team. And so I've never felt alone in leadership. And so after that first weekend, I realized, okay, there's something I can lead in this capacity. I don't need to lead a big, huge mega church. I don't need to lead a big organization. All leadership isn't that. But I think I can lead these weekends effectively. I know them well. I care about them. I care about the people. I care about the staff as well as the participants. I guess that's what a good leader would do. So yeah, that was back in 2008. I think I'm about up to 215 Crucible weekends now, 20 some years later.
So I want to pull on this string a little bit more about the reluctant leader, because I'm very tempted to name drop here. Because I knowing a little bit about your past, and as I'm saying this, I think, now how much of this is true and how much is urban legend? Because I've had people say, well, Judson he's the ghostwriter for this well-known pastor. And I'm like, man, so now I'm saying, is that true? But what was it? So I know some of these names that I imagine were leaders whose circle you were in, but there was something about Greg's invitation to you that brought you out of your minimalization of your own self. So say more about that. Like, how did he connect with you to convince you that you're not alone in this?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to support leaders. I don't have to be the leader, and to help a leader do a really good job is satisfying to me. I don't have to be the person that is that leader. So in the role that I had in the church that I was in, when I was supporting other leaders, I felt happy about that. I felt like this is a good thing. This is needful. Good kings have a court. They have people around them. Any CEO's got a board. Everybody that leads does have good people around them, and I'm happy to be one of the good people. But really, the situation with Greg was simply he just wanted it, and the others were happy to have me lead at the level that I was leading in that organization, which was a much smaller scale, a much fewer people. In the 29 years I worked there, I never supervised anyone. Now, I did help lead some teams of volunteers. I did teach before a lot of people, but I wasn't in charge of things. So Greg simply asked me, and the need was there. That's the other thing, is the need in the organization I was in was not there. They had world-class leaders. I'm not needed for that level of leadership. But in Crucible, it was just getting off the ground. We were 5 years into it. It needed the leadership. And so I could see that my need and Greg's invitation and what was out there and who I am kind of came together.
So now that you're on the other side of the leadership, when you see others that you can draw along on their journey, is there something that you look for, or is there something that you have in your back pocket that this will bring them in, this will help them take their next step?
Yes. On almost every weekend I serve, I go to the kitchen. I look at who's serving in the kitchen. I look at how they're serving in the kitchen. I look at how people are responding to them in the kitchen. I look at the kind of people that are willing to do kitchen work and do it with joy and do it well. So, I think pretty much most of the leaders I've known that have done any good look pretty good in the kitchen with their leadership. So I start in the kitchen.
Man,
if you can do that well and people respond to you there and you're a servant attitude, then you might have what we need to be a leader in Crucible. That's one place to start.
And so when you come across that guy who you see the potential, but they're reluctant themselves, how do you draw them out of themselves?
Well, I will say that most of the people that I've run into, because we are a leadership development culture in Crucible, a lot of these people understand they are welcome in leadership. So I wouldn't say I'd had to pull too hard on anybody. I think I've probably had to help some people that got discouraged along the way. There's certainly people that go, this process takes a long time and it just feels like it's a moving target. When am I ever going to get there? So I've dealt with a lot of people that run into leadership discouragement. But even that is a test of the leadership. If you can't get past your discouragement, if you can't have those second thoughts and still persevere and keep going, that also is a leadership skill to be developed. Now, I don't throw them into the deep water and say, you better learn how to swim on your own. But I watch that and yeah, there's encouragement. So bottom line is our leadership culture is you watch, you imitate, learn, teach, do, or learn, do, teach. So it's like you learn it, then you actually do it, and then you try to teach others to do it. So I think just by encouragement, primarily by putting people into places where they get a chance to use their leadership, and then the feedback that we give helps them do better. And I think a lot of people come back on our weekends as staff. A lot of leaders step into leadership because they're entrusted to do something and then they get better at it. And that's kind of a way you pay a volunteer, is you help them get better at things. So it's a more subtle role. It's supporting, it's encouraging, it's giving feedback, sometimes blunt, but always with a heart of love and saying, I want you to bring your little snowball if that's all you have.
And so I don't remember reading in a leadership book how perseverance, I don't remember that being the title of a chapter, but I think you're right in saying that is a quality of a leader. And if it's not there, the leader's, and he's just not going to be a leader. But I don't know that I valued that exactly in leadership.
Well, we used to say in the leadership, again, I listened to leaders, although I didn't get as much of a chance to lead. But I remember one of the leaders saying, if a little gust of wind blows that guy's dinghy over, I'm not sure he's going to be able to handle when the storms come. And, that kind of imagery stuck with me. Again, not that we create the hurricanes in people's lives, but they're coming. And so I like to watch and I look to myself as well. How do I handle the little things? How do I handle the medium-sized things? And then how can I handle the big things?
So another thing you said there was feedback. And I do think, man, in the Crucible community, that is so consistently expected. it can almost be taken for granted that that's a part of our culture. How can you imagine other leaders, first searching for feedback for themselves if in whatever context they're in?
You do have to ask yourself, why do some leaders not want feedback? And there are many that do not. There are many leaders that simply want to surround themselves with people that will do their bidding, that will tell them how great they are, and that they won't be contrarian. Lots of leaders do that. And some of them actually get into high places. But I've also seen a trend, and this is true even in business leadership and in other leadership circles, not just church leadership, where people understand the idea of servant leadership, that there's actually some better qualities to a servant leader than who is willing to listen, who actually seeks out the feedback, who is not threatened by someone telling them how they might be able to do it better. So again, why don't you want feedback? Well, for most people, it's an ego thing. It could also be that it hurts. I mean, if somebody tells you something you don't want to hear, there's some emotional baggage to that, or some emotional pain to that. I get that. And some leaders are easily discouraged. Some think they're just doing such a great job, they don't need it. But what I've seen is that the people that get better over time recognize it really doesn't matter how good you get. You can always get better. And it really doesn't matter. As one person told me, I don't care how smart you are. You cannot see the back of your head without a mirror. And more smarts don't make you able to do that. More experience doesn't make you able to do that. There is only one way. You have to listen to whoever's behind you and hear what they see. That is the only way. You have to have a mirror. And so again, good leaders know that they cannot possibly see everything in themselves or that's out there in the world that needs to be done or ways to do it. So good leaders know I got to have mirrors. I got to have other perspectives. And if I get that, here's the cool thing. I actually get better. So if my ego is bruised, if it's all about the ego, well, hey, this is a path to get even better at it. So if you need the ego strokes, pats on the back, this is how you get them, is you welcome that kind of feedback. Now, truthfully, if you're in leadership for the ego boost, you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
Leadership is a very bad place to work out your need for attention and love because it never comes. You may think it does, but it never really comes reliably. So you really have to understand, the reason I lead, or the way I lead, is I do the right thing for these people, whether they like it or not, whether they appreciate it or not. And I will do the right thing for them, even if they, at the end of the thing, reject me and kick me out. I'll still do the right thing as best I see it for them. Because that's what leaders do.
Yeah. I remember somebody saying, if you're in leadership because you want to make people happy, you're in the wrong business. You should be selling ice cream. And there's something to that, man. When you first mentioned feedback, my first thought was, how can I create a culture around me where I'm giving feedback to my people? And as soon as the thought started to come out, it's like, oh, I'm starting in the wrong place.
Well, one thing you have to help people understand is it's less painful than you think. And once you do it a lot, you actually do kind of, it's like cold water. All these people are doing cold plunges right now. At some point you start to like it. And I do think that one of the ways we help others around us is to help them see it's not fatal. Oh yeah, maybe it's a bit of a ding to your ego, but it actually is not that painful. And then when you have a culture of it, where it's just what we regularly do for each other, it does become almost painless, almost.
Yeah. I heard someone say recently, I don't take constructive criticism from people that I wouldn't ask advice from, or I don't take criticism from people I wouldn't ask advice from. And I think there's something wise there. If you're seeking feedback, you may want to start with people you would also ask their advice. Like, start with a place where you feel safe. But that is so true. When I see people with bald spots in the back of their head, I think they don't know. When they see pictures of themselves, they're surprised at how large that bald spot is, because we can't see the back of our heads.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. I just had that experience. That's why I'm fumbling, because I was literally with my trainer and he was taking videos of me doing some exercises. And I said, boy, that guy is really thinning back there. And it was me. So sorry. You threw me off.
Well, as the bald guy, I remember the moment my wife handed me my ball cap and said, hey, you're going to thank me later. And I'm like, why are you giving me my ball cap? That was hard to take. It was hard for me to take, even that news, that feedback.
Yeah. Understand.
Even though it was true.
Well, yeah. You do have to be selective in who you ask for feedback, and not because they make it easy. Again, in leadership, no matter what you do, you're going to have a group of people that think it was wonderful and they just want to pat you on the back. And sometimes their motives are they want to ingratiate themselves to you. So you just got to be aware of that. And then there's people that are somewhat indifferent. They're like, yeah, well, great. You did what you're supposed to do. And then you got the people that are trying to find fault, and they pretty much criticize anything you do. So I do think you can listen to all of them, but you do have to develop a discerning skill. And frankly, if you ask people to do it, you can circumvent this problem. So you look at the people that you really trust and you ask them before the fact, would you give me some feedback? And then you don't have to worry, because you trust these people before they even, you have to vet them afterwards. All the others, you just sort of have to vet. The meanies, just stay away from them. The people in the middle, if you press them, they might give you some ideas. And the people that just pat you on the back, be really suspicious. And the scripture says that, watch out for the people that kiss you. It's a friend who hurts you that's much better than somebody who just showers you with praise and, you're great, you're fantastic.
Yeah. Just recently I found myself being, I don't know how to describe it except that I could feel it in my body, that I felt a reaction when a certain topic came up about something that I had done. And I felt this closing in protectiveness, and I realized I'm afraid of something. I'm afraid of a critique here. Why is that? And a few questions later, I finally realized I need to ask somebody I trust. And so I can trust their feedback. And that proverb, the wounds of a brother are to be trusted more than the kisses of an enemy. Like, I have people in my life, I can ask them, give me your honest feedback. And man, that felt so empowering just to have it out there. I'm not hiding, and I can trust what you tell me. Instead of being scary, it was exciting.
Yeah. And built into our Crucible leadership is that same sort of thing. You have co-leaders. We have what we call teaching coordinators. They give feedback. And then you're going to have the average kind of person giving feedback. It's interesting. We did an experiment where we wanted to get some feedback for our leaders by polling. What we found is that the staff just basically said nice things about the leaders. Now, I'm sure they're not always thinking nice things about the leaders, but they didn't want to put it in writing. So, it's like, okay, just polling the people that, you led, not all feedback's equal.
Yeah. Well, Judson, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our audience before we close this out?
I do want to encourage anybody that's thinking about leadership. We don't have a future. We don't have a future without volunteers. We don't have a future without participants, but we definitely don't have a future if we don't grow more leaders. And the thing about leaders is they get old and die. I'm going to get old and die. And so, it behooves us to have leadership. And I'd rather that people try out leadership and discover it's not as good a fit as I thought it might be than to have people who are in the background not leading because whatever message they have that they shouldn't lead. Now, it's also incumbent on those of us who are leaders to look and study and invite others into leadership. So that there is that responsibility. So if you're a leader already, I encourage you, do your inviting work, do your encouraging work, help people see their potential the way, Greg helped me see mine. And it's okay if you step into this and you discover it's not as good a fit as you thought it might be. We won't hold that against you, and you'll still learn great things. So again, we're not going to let everybody lead. That would be foolish, but we're going to pretty much let anybody try.
Yeah. As soon as you said the words reluctant leader, I thought, oh my goodness, that could be the title of my biography. I really connect with that. And I'm so grateful for the space and the timing that's been allowed for me to slowly move into leadership, and for leaders like you who have pulled me aside and said, hey, this is what we're doing here. Judson, one of my first memories of you is at a brand new retreat site when I was maybe second or third time staffing, and you and Bob Lacasio were going to walk around this West Texas retreat site and see how are we going to set this up for welcoming the participants. And you guys said, hey, Tim, you're going to have to figure this out in Mexico, so why don't you walk with us? And so you're unpacking how this is going to look. and asking for my input. It felt like I was invited to play with the big kids. And I feel like that's the spirit of Crucible in working together with men. Is we have leaders and we have a leadership team on every weekend, and we all have voices. And you're right, not everybody gets to lead, but every man is invited to take that next step on his journey and see where it leads. And it's just, man, we use the phrase a lot, creating the world that we want to be a part of. So men, if you're out there listening to this, and if somebody sent you the link to this, maybe because they see you as a reluctant leader, because they see that potential in you, you're invited on this journey with us. And it's a fun thing getting to create the world that we want to be a part of together. So thank you, Judson. I really appreciate your time today and your wisdom. This is a joy for me to get to ask the questions. So thank you.
Well, great to be here.
And thank you to our listeners. We love getting to be a part of what God is doing in this world. And if our journeys get to cross paths, that makes us excited. So if you're more curious about the Crucible Project, please check us out.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening. And don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.